In part 2 of our episode, we continue our interview with Michelle Belanger. If you're a regular follower of MagickTV, you will know that we've interviewed Michelle several times, and each interview seems to be more interesting than the one before. I'm sure that you'll enjoy part 2 of our interview. So, you've been involved in Paranormal State, and I'd like to ask how that experience has been for you.
Paranormal State, which was, when it was on the air, was a hit television show for A&E. That was an interesting thing for me. Now, most people who have watched the show probably recognize, since they deal in some episodes with demonic possession, it's got a very Christian vibe to it. But one of the things that you don't really get to see is behind the scenes. Although Ryan Buell, who's the star of the show, is a devout Catholic, he is the type of a Catholic that any witch, pagan, or magical practitioner loves. Somebody who's open-minded, willing to learn, and fiercely defensive of his friends' rights to follow their own paths. So he has very good friends with Elfie Music, who is a pagan, and actually raised in a family lineage that is very dear to her. I came on in part to offer a counterpoint to some of the Christian stuff, but also Ryan, who was educated in some of his research by Lorraine Warren, who some people have mixed feelings about, but I have to say she's a dear little lady, and you should really, if you ever meet Lorraine Warren, ask her about her dog, Sir Isle of Skye, and you'll see her sunny disposition as she just lights up over her pet. Lorraine's approach was, if you are dealing with someone about the occult, the paranormal, if they're having experiences, you approach them in their own belief system. So if a Catholic is having problems with something, you have a Catholic priest come in and deal with it. But we also had pagan people who were having problems who contacted the show. And they felt comfortable in contacting the show because Elfie was openly a witch. Josh on the show, the tech expert, you didn't get to see so much because they focused on his tech background as somebody who had a degree in engineering. He was also a practicing pagan. So they would bring me in as pagan clergy to then deal with those people and deal with the spirit and resolving the haunting within the framework of belief for the family. I love the Paranormal Research Society. That's Ryan and Sergi and Elfie and their group that was originally a student organization at Penn State University in Pennsylvania. They're very dear friends. My best experience with the show was first helping people who had no context for anything paranormal or unusual or magical in their world. Giving them an idea of how to identify what's actually dangerous as opposed to what's merely alarming to them because their worldview gave them no context for the fact that something might be in their house that isn't alive. And then just really bonding on the road with my friends, debating, what is the nature of a spirit? Okay, if there are demons, what are they exactly? Do they always have to be something that is so bound to, like the movie The Exorcist? We did definitely see some things that were dark. There were some things that were fiercely out to hurt some people. But at the end of the day, the main thing people needed to learn was, first, to never give anything dark their fear, especially if it is something that seems to be going after them in a negative way. You don't give it your fear, you claim your space, you refuse to be a victim, and don't tell the Christians, but most of the stuff I taught them is how to set up basically warding spells to keep their house safe. But just changed out the God and Goddess for Jesus, found certain biblical passages that would work for them. And in doing that work, actually was able to frame it in a way that they realized that we're all doing the same stuff. It all comes from here. Belief and faith itself, regardless of what name or shape it takes. That's probably something that ties us all together most fundamentally.
I think that's very true. And you were telling me about your new tarot deck.
I can't say I am working on it. This is 10 years. For 10 years I have been working on a tarot. It has changed titles as I worked on it, and I finally, over the past several years, settled on it as the Watcher Angel Tarot. It is a culmination of a fair amount of research and several key ideas. I am a fan of the 20th century mythologist Joseph Campbell, and he really, reading his stuff and Carl Jung's stuff is how I really came to understand the tarot. I've been reading it since I was 14, and the story of tarot, the way I connect to the cards is that they each tell me a story, because the art and the pictures and then the cycle through the major arcana, from the Fool leaping off into experience and then going through his journey of development and encountering different figures and powers that lead him one way or the other, being torn down through the experience of death in the tower, and then going from the star, the small little bit of light in the darkness, and then the moon, the sometimes misleading light in the darkness, and the sun, and then finally being sent back and ending the journey only to begin a new one at the world. So the cycle of myth, the cycle of story in the tarot, that's a part of the concept in the Watcher Angel Tarot. So of course I took a mythic system, a mythology that was very personal for me, and I married it to my deck to tell an even more nuanced and potent story. And that mythology may sound Christian, but I actually believe that the angels are the remnant of a polytheistic faith prior to the onset of monotheism. Raphael, as easily as healing of God, is probably originally God of healing, to be perfectly honest. And most of my research, I've got a degree in comparative religious studies, and I dig through the early texts of Christianity and Judaism to see why we believe the things that we believe now, how they've changed over time. That research goes into the idea of the angels who looked down upon the daughters of men and found them fair, and chose. They weren't kicked out of heaven. They chose to leave their spiritual realm to come and have an earthly experience, to explore what it was like. But they were also bringers of knowledge and wisdom and magic. And they taught their wives and they taught their children hybrids of heaven and earth. All manner of things, divination and root cutting and magic, and even down to how to paint their faces to be beautiful and to embrace that beauty, because there's it's kind of anti-dualism. It's looking at the fact that you can be spirit but also enjoy being flesh. So the Watcher Angel Tarot encodes a lot of those ideas. I started looking for an artist. I went through a couple of people, some of whom simply could not commit the time. A tarot deck is not a small undertaking. I finally found Jackie Williams through a friend. Actually, the friend is a member of my order, House Keperu. And Jackie, whose background is as a trained medieval scribe who does illuminated manuscript work, just amazing stuff, decided to move her work into watercolor and do these 78 individual illustrations for the deck. And we kind of ride the line, because the Watcher Angels, they've come from a heavenly realm, but they've also come to an earthly realm, and their experience is mixed. They can get ahead of themselves. They get a little overwhelmed by the temptations of the flesh, and that is played out in especially the suits, where in the Pentacles it's them coming down and establishing their empire. And then you move to the Cups, where you have a golden age of art and beauty with a little bit of decadence thrown in. And then you move to the Wands, where it is a hermetic school of magic, where they are teaching people and showing them to strive toward releasing the fire within and directing the will to create reality. But it finally ends with the Swords, as you start to have competitiveness and clashing ideals, and brother goes against brother, and the age ends in that conflict, only to begin again. 10 years, and it will come out this October. I finally got to see the page proofs. It's been a really amazing journey. We made it a magical one. Poor Jackie didn't quite expect that she was going to pathwork every single card that she painted. That was a little shocking at first for her. There were a few times where she's like, I kind of hate you. The one thing that we did to keep to it was we started with the Fool, We ended with the world. Everything else in between had a lot to do with Jackie's path. And I think that it will speak to both sides. People who've never done tarot readings and never encountered the tarot, people who are old hats at it, as well as people who are pagan as well as Christian. I think we'll find something in this deck that speaks to them. In a lot of ways, it forwards my work to build bridges and to show in the end that we're really all talking about the same thing. Spiritual beings having a human experience, and then human beings having a spiritual experience. At the end of the day, the story about the Watcher Tarot is the divine becoming human and the human becoming divine, and that is the core of magical work.
Yes, indeed. So if people would like to learn more about you, more about your tarot, and more about your projects, where would they go?
Well, the first thing would be my website, which is my first and last name, MichelleBelanger.com, but if you're, American, it's Michelle Belanger. You can also go and see the entire tarot deck at SpiralFireStudio.com. You can get that link through my website as well. Although at this point, if you just Google Watcher Angel Tarot, I think we're the first several pages. We've been tweeting about it and Facebooking about it, and Jackie's kind of like shown almost a travel log of her whole process through her journals and her blogs. She started the paintings in 2006, and we did the last one earlier this year. It's been a journey.
Quite a project.
Oh, it's been a journey.
Thank you very much for taking time to talk to us.
No problem at all. It's always a delight.
It's always a delight to talk to you. And many blessings.
Seek your own truth.
I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Join us again next time for more of Living the Wiccan Life. Until then, may you blessed be.